So I'm here with Nikki, CEO of Homebound, fifthwall portfolio company, who has a lot of experience, I feel like, assessing what this crisis, this tragedy we just lived through. So, Nikki, maybe can you just start with introducing yourself and Homebound and how you got started as a business?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Brendan. And obviously, thanks for a ton of support in building the company. So, Homebound started out of wildfires in Napa and Sonoma. In 2017, the Tubbs Fire and associated fire complex burned out about 6,000 houses in Northern California, which at the time was the largest and most destructive wildfire in the history of California. And the damage at that moment felt unfathomable. 6,000 houses. And this is in an area where they built about 300 homes a year before the fire. So that's kind of your capacity to rebuild. At the time, I was working at a local services marketplace. So I knew kind of how to find labor in different places and assemble it to do different projects. But I also knew that that model was totally insufficient for something as significant as rebuilding a whole home. My co-founder, Jack, lost his home in the fire in Sonoma, and very quickly we were out sending his plans around, trying to find builders who would be able to build. And there was nobody who was ready. Like for a house where he had a multi-million-dollar insurance check in his pocket, he was ready to build. Local builders were saying, I'll put you on my wait list. I'll call you in 3 or 4 years. And so we just said, well, we can build a network that could enable us to get started much faster. And we started calling people in other states and other parts of California to say, would you come rebuild houses? And the universal answer was, yes, I can be there next week. Tell me what to do. And then we started thinking about homeowners and what do they need to actually navigate this time period to know what's the next step to take. And it was clear that there was a real opportunity to leverage technology in an industry where there is almost no technology to help homeowners see the path and walk down that path. And then as we started getting into that, we realized we can make this a lot more efficient. It's not just about helping homeowners get through the process, but it's how do you make the entire process of building a home more efficient, starting in a disaster area where you have a really big problem to solve. But as we realized going through, it was like, no, this is not just a disaster area. This is the whole industry is massively inefficient, and we're pretty sure we can help. So that was 7 years ago. Homebound has since rebuilt in multiple disaster impacted areas. So at the time we thought this is the worst wildfire in the history of California. It's a one-time thing. And then, of course, we're going to go just build normal houses. That turned out to be untrue. We mobilized to the Woolsey fire in 1 year after starting the company. We started the company in 2018 and
And that
2019.
was Malibu, right?
That was Malibu, yeah. And that was the same year that the Paradise fires happened as well. We felt better equipped to go solve Malibu than Paradise, but both of them were just devastating fires. And then we've also mobilized to other areas, rebuilt in Louisville and Superior, outside of Denver. We've rebuilt after hurricanes in the Bahamas, in Fort Myers Beach in Florida. So we now have this kind of disaster recovery playbook, but the original thesis of the company was not actually about disasters. It was like, we got to help our neighbors in our backyard. But really the thesis was home building is broken because there's no technology to help make it better. And when you have a really complicated situation where you need to build homes, the industry is even worse because it doesn't have technology. And so the original insight was we can build technology to enable areas that have this massive supply demand imbalance and a lot of complexity rebuild faster. And then that platform we can take to other markets that are facing other kinds of disasters, like sudden mass migration from one place to another, which we saw during the pandemic, or significant housing shortages, which we've seen in basically every market across the country where you urgently need more homes than you have, where we can help use technology to be much more creative about where you can build homes and much more nimble about building quickly in places that need to expand.
And I think people conceptually think of like home builders as, they buy a bunch of land, they build a bunch of kind of, almost like formula made homes, and they're just
Yeah.
like spat out in
Yeah.
industrial style. You're doing something very different. And I guess, can you explain that for people? Like, how do you build homes on a distributed basis?
Yeah. One thing that I'll start with is just the home building industry is kind of two industries. On one end of the spectrum, you have your big public production home builders, like what you just outlined, where, I'm buying hundreds of acres of farmland. I'm going to convert it to thousands of lots, and then I'm going to build nearly identical houses all next to each other. And that's a really efficient way to build homes with no technology where, I poured that foundation yesterday. I'll pour this one today. I'm going to pour that one tomorrow. But they're efficient because they just removed all of the complexity. And that's about 80% of the units in the US and about 60% of the total dollars that go into home building, and $500 billion a year of new homes in the US typically. 60% of those dollars are production style homes. The other side of the market, which is 20% of units, but it's your more expensive units, are typically built by custom home builders, which is there's 329,000 licensed home builders in the US. They all build a few homes a year. And so if you think about that dichotomy between Lennar, highly efficient, building at, in some places $70 a square foot, they can build a house inside of 3 months. And you contrast that to a custom home builder who's going to take maybe 5 to 10 times as long to build a home, going through a totally different permitting process, going through different architectural design. It's like the opposite end of the spectrum and is wildly inefficient. But custom home builders are the ones who serve all of the distributed opportunities. So after a fire, you got to deal with, in LA, we have 15,000 estimated structures that need to be rebuilt. Nearly every single one of those is owned by a different person. And so you're going to need typically you'll need a custom home builder to come in and say, okay, what would you like to build? And so the original insight of Homebound was you shouldn't have these two totally different industries where you can choose between a efficiently built house and a house that is what you want, where you want it. You should be able to use technology to bridge that. So that was one of the early insights was we can actually broaden the idea of how do you find lots to build on. And that works in disaster impacted areas, but also works in non-disaster areas. And then we can use technology to enable a level of project management, efficiency, and control that simply doesn't exist. So most home builders are going to have maybe paper and pencil for plans and for schedules and are sort of managing day to day a little bit on the fly versus a really rigid digital schedule that's dynamically moving things around as things are changing, taking into account things like weather patterns and are you going to be able to pour the foundation or dry in the house today. Having a really dynamic digital schedule that is driving a project along is another huge opportunity when you're doing something that's a little bit more complicated with a lot more moving pieces.
And what's the feedback from customers like? When you kind of first connect with a customer that either wants to build a new home or wants to replace the home,
Yeah.
what do they say when they kind of hear this is an option?
Kind of biggest thing we hear is like, this is home building as it should be. This is the modern home builder. This is the next generation home builder. Because when we're working with a homeowner, they'll come to us. We can, if they bring a lot, we can programmatically match our plans to their lot and say, hey, here's 4 plans that fit on the lot. And then they can go through our checkout flow in software to configure that house for their lot, or they can pick one of our lots and they can configure a house. And in real time, they can play with things like, well, what if I add the back deck? What if I add the 3rd car garage? What if I upgrade to exactly the kitchen that I've always hoped for? So it gives them this level of access and control that just doesn't exist anywhere in home building today, that enables them to make better decisions. And so whether it's a homeowner in a disaster impacted area where they know what their insurance budget is, and they're just trying to race home as fast as possible within that budget. So it's access and transparency, and it's really enabling us to build with the efficiency of a production home builder, but the flexibility and the nimbleness of a custom home builder.
As you look at LA, can you
Yeah.
help people just like understand the scope and the scale of what just happened? Can you help people just contextualize that?
Yeah. I mean, I can try, but I will say it is, even for someone who has seen every major fire that has happened over the last 7 years, I've toured every single city that's been impacted by fires. It is unfathomable. And there's a couple things about it that are unfathomable. One is the scale. So 15,000 structures estimated to be destroyed. It's estimated to be 250 billion plus in building. Like, just to think about that, that is half of all of the new homes built in the entire United States in a single year. That's the dollar value we're talking about just in one part of LA. There's 2 other things about it that are really unique and are just so hard to imagine if you have not spent time in these neighborhoods. The first is the density of these neighborhoods. You're looking at places that are literally on the ocean. Like, there are portions of Malibu where homes that were 40 feet from the ocean burned down. The other piece of it is it wasn't just homes. It was commercial districts. It was restaurants. It was schools. It was all sorts of community centers that really change the face of what it's going to feel like to live in the Palisades or the Altadena area. It takes a long time. It's really hard, but the communities that come through to the other side have this quality that you will never get in any other community: a tightness, a commitment to being in that community and being a good neighbor to rebuilding something that's far better than existed before. You have neighborhoods up in the area that was impacted by the Tubbs fire in Sonoma, where you've got neighborhoods that just got rebuilt with these beautiful homes that are far more resilient, far more sustainable, that are adapted to modern life today. And then you've got people living in them who lived through something that was so hard, and they have a dedication and a love for their neighborhood that you can't approximate anywhere else. So that is the one good thing I will say to anyone who's gone through this is it's going to be a tough road to the other side, but when you get to the other side, you're going to have the most incredible home in the tightest knit neighborhood you could ever imagine.
And so when you think about then rebuilding some of these truly devastated areas, what are some of the big challenges that are maybe idiosyncratic to California, which I think you
Yeah.
intimately know well? Like,
Yeah.
why is this hard to do?
Yeah. One piece that's unique to California is California is much more difficult from a permitting standpoint and from an inspections standpoint. Sonoma County did a phenomenal job of saying, we got to rebuild, we've got to rebuild fast. And to do it, what we're going to be focused on is we're going to get people permits really quickly. And so that 9+ months to get a permit before the fire turned into we're going to get third-party inspectors to help with permit applications and inspections. We're going to cut a bunch of red tape of like rules that we would normally require people to follow, code we would require people to get up to. We're going to cut for homeowners who are impacted. And we could get a permit inside of 3 weeks in Sonoma County. So like that's incredible. LA County, I am trusting, or there are 5 counties that are involved in the impacted areas. I'm trusting that they'll do the same thing, but that's going to be critical. And Governor Newsom and Mayor Bass have already talked about cutting red tape and shutting down some of the real challenges around environmental that make it really hard and really slow and really unpredictable to get permits in California. So if they do what they have said that they're going to do, you should be able to get a permit hopefully in under a month anywhere that was impacted, but it also requires staffing. And one thing that's happening across the country is permitting departments and building departments for inspectors are having huge problems attracting and retaining staff. And the counties that were impacted should absolutely be able to figure that out, but it's a hard thing to figure out that they wouldn't normally need to sort through. And then it's going to be about making it easy for builders to build as quickly as possible, which is largely about inspections once you've got a permit. So making it easy to do virtual inspections, to get inspections next day so that you don't have houses sitting for weeks on end. And then there are a lot of things about building houses in California that are just more expensive than other places. California requires, for example, solar on every new home constructed. Building departments are going to have to make decisions about what are you going to require and how will it impact the cost for a homeowner who might be very budget constrained with their insurance proceeds.
And when you think about Homebound's ambitions as a firm, does Southern California, in the aftermath of this tragedy, is that an opportunity for you to kind of help build back these areas better? Or how are you thinking about that?
Yeah, so I would say I think of it as kind of a responsibility. And I don't have an answer yet on exactly how Homebound is going to participate in the rebuild effort, but we are absolutely going to help in whatever capacity makes sense. That may be going and rebuilding there, and we are certainly exploring that. We're talking to tons of impacted homeowners who are looking for solutions. We're talking to aid organizations. We're talking to other large builders in the area. And we've built a full stack technology platform that enables us to look at every plotted parcel within any impacted area or really any MSA across the country and determine what is the optimal thing to build on every single lot. So we have this whole platform built, and then we have software that allows builders to build really efficiently, communicate with trades, communicate with the homeowner, or whether it's just helping in the background, advising building departments or other builders or homeowners on how to get through this as effectively as possible.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's obviously it's an incredible tragedy, but I think there is an opportunity to kind of address certainly some aspects of what was already plaguing LA in this rebuild. And I think we feel, we were started in LA as a business. We feel the same way. Well, Nikki, it's been so interesting just like getting your perspective. And I really wanted to reach out to you because I remember the story of how and why you founded the business. And obviously this happened, and it just seemed like you were the right person to get some feedback from.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and we'll absolutely keep you posted on what we end up doing. And also, we're very close with a lot of other builders in the area. So there will be a rebuild plan, and we'll do everything we can to help make sure that it happens on the fastest possible timeline.
Awesome. Thanks, Nikki.